good afternoon to you. Today is the day that I leave Tokyo and in fact mainland Japan. And of course, being me, I left all the necessary preparations up to the exact last moment. I've been rushing all morning to get ready for my flight. I'm on my way to Okinawa. And I realized at the very last moment that I also promised that I would make a Tale of Two Koreatowns Part 2 and show you guys the North Korean town of Tokyo. So here I am with my camera packed away in my bag, filming on my iPhone, so hopefully the quality turns out okay. But we're here in a place that I actually always wanted to talk about. It's one of the things that kind of made me want to start a YouTube channel. It was just the possibility of talking about the history of an interesting place such as this. So over the last half a year or more, I've been living across the bridge from where I'm sitting now. And this place is called Edagawa Ichome. So Edagawa District 1. Edagawa means branch river, by the way. As you can see, it's a charming little park. You can also perhaps make out from the state of the building behind me that it hasn't always had such an illustrious past. Let's have a little walk around, and hopefully, I apologize if the camera's a bit shaky. Let's walk around and talk about the area. This city, Tokyo, was once the capital of a nation-state that no longer exists, the Empire of Japan. The Empire of Japan included, of course, Japan. It wouldn't be much of an Empire of Japan without Japan, but included Taiwan and Korea, much without those countries' consent. During the Japanese Empire, a lot of people were brought from the Korean peninsula to Tokyo forcibly to work. And after the empire collapsed, a lot of those people who were ethnically Korean but had been forced to move to Tokyo found themselves basically to be stateless people. Found themselves to be living in a country that they weren't citizens of, that sometimes, perhaps during the early transition days, I imagine they might have even been denied certain work rights. I'm sure they were denied rights to work in government agencies and things like that, because they were no longer Japanese imperial citizens. They were, I was about to say they're Koreans, but even then that would raise the question of whether they're North Korean citizens or whether they're South Korean citizens, because you must remember, in 1945, when the Japanese Empire collapsed, there was a power vacuum. The Korean Peninsula, which had been governed as a part of the Empire of Japan by the Japanese imperial government, found itself with no government all of a sudden. Soviet Union said, don't worry, we'll take care of the North, we'll hand it back over to the Korean people, which they never did. The United States said, we'll take over the South and we'll hand it back over to the Korean people, which, to their credit, they supported the United Nations elections in South Korea, which the north of Korea, which is now North Korea, said they just wouldn't take part in, which is why they're two separate countries. So what does that all have to do with this place where I'm sitting? I'm gonna stand out the sun for a second. What does that have to do with this charming little park with these cute elephants, with these slightly run-down buildings over here, and also, by the way, some lovely houses over here? Well, basically, in 1964, the Summer Olympics was announced that would be in Tokyo. And before the Summer Olympics was to take place, Tokyo and Japan in general wanted to put its best foot forward. It wanted to show the world that it wasn't an evil empire anymore, that was a nice modern place, a nice place to live. So what I've gathered happened from reading Japanese sources, I don't think there's much information about this available in English. Can I fit in the elephant? There we go. sitting on an elephant in the North Korean community playground. What was I saying? Yes, 1964, lead up to the Tokyo Summer Olympics, Japanese government brought a bunch of people from overseas and took them around Tokyo. The condition was that they wanted to know their feedback on how they felt about Tokyo, what could be improved to make the Olympics a slicker experience, what aspects of Tokyo could be made better in order for foreign visitors to enjoy it more. And what some of those respondents said is they say, we love the city, but there are a couple of slums. We don't like those slums. We'd like those to be, cleaned up. It so happened that, of course, because of the awful history that I explained before of these ethnic Korean people being kind of ripped from their homeland, placed in Japan, discriminated against, not having much work rights, of course the people living in those slums tended to be ethnically Korean. So what Japan did is it took those people living in those slums and it forced them to relocate to this area. Why this area? I looked at the map and I read into some of the reasons that this particular area was chosen. And apparently, in this area of reclaimed land, there was a garbage dump. And I think it's over here. The garbage dump's gone, but I think it was located, in this area. In fact, I think it might have been this. Now a car park, but I mean, you can see this isn't the finest construction. Imagine that. You've had an awful time, most of your life probably been discriminated against, affected by war. And so they can have a nice Olympics. You're forced to live here in the garbage dump. There's not really much you can say about that, is there? So what does that have to do with North Korea? Once the people here were forcibly relocated, they decided that they wanted to make the best of it, make beautiful houses to live in, try and get on with their lives, which to the credit of the people here, you can see that some of them at least, are doing okay for themselves. But they wanted to make a school for their children so they could have an education and get past all this terrible history. I'm gonna walk past the school now. And on our way there, let's chat about it. When the community here decided it wanted to make a school, it of course approached the Japanese government for funding. Japanese government was leading the country where they lived in. Japanese government was the place that relocated them. Japanese government was their governing body. Does that make sense that they approached them for funding? The Japanese government said no. It wasn't going to fund their school. Just simply wanted them to just disappear amongst the garbage. So they approached the South Korean government. The South Korean government also said no. They said, well, you're in Japan. Japan and South Korea are now different countries. The Japanese government is the place that has jurisdiction over you. They owe you a duty of care. We no longer owe you a duty of care. But now there was two Koreas. So apparently they approached the North Korean government, and the North Korean government was the only place that gave them funding. Now, of course, North Korea is a brutal totalitarian regime with awful human rights. I'm in no way implying that North Korea is necessarily the good guys in this story. But you must understand, or at least I understand, in some way, how the people here must feel that that was the only government that really acknowledged their existence. And so, with the funding of the North Korean government, and apparently also a little bit of a dose of propaganda, they ended up making the school that I'm looking at right now. The school is, I think it's called the Chosen Dainigakko, something like that. Something that I find quite interesting is that in the English language, we simply just say Korea. By the way, sorry, before I know I'm getting sidetracked, but this place has some amazing Korean barbecue. Something I find very fascinating about the difference in language is that in English we simply just say Korea. There's North Korea and there's South Korea. And what would happen if North Korea and South Korea merge? Well, they just presumably form a country called Korea. Easy solution. However, apparently in the Korean language, the name of Korea changes dynastically. So as the era changes, as the dynasty changes, so does the name. So my understanding is that when the English-speaking peoples came in contact, or at least European historians, came in contact with Korea, it was calling itself Koryo. It was in the Koryo dynasty or era or age, which is where we get the English word for Korea. But since then, its name has changed many times. In English, we're still rocking this old, outdated name for the country. But here's where it gets really interesting. When Japan annexed Korea, it considered itself to be in an age called the Joseon Age. Korean, Japanese, and Chinese traditionally use the same characters. Chinese characters have meaning tied to their meaning as opposed to our phonetic alphabet. So kind of like different Europeans can look at each other's words, understand how they're pronounced, but not necessarily what they mean. Asian languages are, East Asian languages at least, quite different. You can look at what's written, know what it means, but not know how it's pronounced. So the word that I just said, Joseon, in Chinese, same characters, pronounced Chaoshen. In Korean, Joseon, and in Japanese, Chosen. So when Japan annexed Korea, it was calling itself Joseon. They spoke Joseonese. They are Joseonese people. However, after the Japanese Empire collapsed, what's now South Korea declared that it was a new dynasty. In Chinese, that's the kanji, the characters are read Hangguo. In Korean, Hanguk, and in Japanese, Kankuk. So then you have this fascinating kind of political linguistic phenomenon where the people in the north of Korea call themselves not just simply Korean, but Joseonese. They speak Joseonese. They will talk to you about Joseonese food. And the people in the South Korea, South Korea, call themselves the Hanese people, the Republic of the Han. They'll talk to you about Hanese food, about Han clothing. And you can see how that can get very political all of a sudden. So I mentioned that there was a school here, and in English, it's simply called the Korean primary school. In English. But what do you call it in Japanese/Korean/Chinese when you write it in kanji? Do you call it the Joseon primary school, because it's funded by North Korea? Do you call it the Han country, the Republic of Han primary school, as some sort of political statement that you're against totalitarianism? Well, you'll find that in the last video I made, when I went to Shiokubo, what I called in English the South Korea town, everything on all of their restaurants is always, without question, Han. This is Han food. This is food from the Han country. This is makeup from the Han country. This is Hanese. Would you like to come to our Hanese language school? But in this area, everything says Choson. It's not just simply Korean barbecue, it's Choson barbecue. It's the Choson primary school. You can take Chosonese classes here. So I find that very fascinating, that as you can see through the implication of language, this is Tokyo's other Koreatown, but it has made very clear through a number of linguistic choices that, at least in some ways, I don't want to overstate and speak for this community, but perhaps at least for the school, which was central to this community, that it owes its allegiance to North Korea, or at least considers itself culturally tied to North Korea. I hope you found that interesting. I particularly found the 1964 Tokyo Olympics a bit interesting, the fact that it completely displaced the community of people. And it makes me think, next year is the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. I hope that Tokyo does a good job and includes all of its residents in making it a success and does Japan proud. And I hope that it's come a long way and has learned from the pain that's caused from the 1964 Olympics. I'm off to Okinawa, and I'll upload some videos from there. Thank you always for watching.